Hello and welcome. I'm Asia Bonacci, a librarian here at TCPL. We are so honored to be able to host Ithaca City of Asylum's Voices of Freedom event this evening. As an organization also dedicated to freedom of information, we are thrilled to work in partnership with ICOA to help amplify the work they do to support Pedro and those like him who seek to attest and create in the face of suppression and censure. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome ICOA board member and Ithaca College professor, Jason Freitag.
Great. Hello, thank you. And Ithaca City of Asylum welcomes you to our Voices of Freedom event tonight. Thank you for coming out on a cold, cold night to listen to this. This is our annual event recognizing artists who continue to create despite persecution. Ithaca City of Asylum was established in 2001 to provide refuge in the Ithaca community for at-risk writers and artists. It enables them to continue their work and helps them and their families meet the challenges of a new environment. ICOA is an all-volunteer project of the Center for Transformative Action and a member of the International Cities of Refuge Network. Actually, one of only 3 in the US. For more information and to learn how to get involved in our work, you can see the Kathleen at the table in the back, or you can go to our website, ithacacitybofasylum.org. This year, we're excited to celebrate the publication of a graphic novel, Milestones of Latin American Democracy. I won't try the Spanish. It's not my strong point. My former ICOA artist in residence, Pedro Molina. The book will be published this month by the United Nations Development Program, and if I'm not mistaken, tonight is the first public presentation of this work. Is that true? It is. Excellent. Before we start, we want to thank our valued sponsors and partners that are making this event possible. First, thank you to the Tompkins County Public Library for making this space available and for what you do for IC year-round. We use these great facilities for our monthly meetings and more, and we are very proud to be part of the work that TCPL does to make this a vibrant community. Good man. Voices of Freedom is generously funded by the Grants for the Arts program of the Community Arts Partnership. This program is made possible in part with funds from the Statewide Community Regrant program for the New York State Council of the Arts, with the support of the Office of the Governor and New York State Legislature, administered by the Community Arts Partnership of Tompkins County. We can give them our hand. They're very generous with us every year. All right, but now on to the main event. Pedro Molina is an internationally known political cartoonist focusing on Nicaragua and Latin America. He publishes regularly for the independent news site Confidencial. His work is published in Counterpoint and on the cartoon website Tiny View. These cartoons are syndication throughout the US. Go to Tiny View, sign up for Pedro. You'll get an amazing cartoon every single day. And it's an amazing amount of output that he engages in. They're great. Among other awards in 2023, Pedro received the distinguished Václav Havel Prize for Creative Dissent, which recognizes individuals who, quote, engage in creative dissent, exhibiting courage and creativity to challenge injustice and live in truth, end quote. He was a 2024 prize finalist for the Herb Block Foundation Prize as a political cartoonist. Molina and his family fled Nicaragua in December 2018 after a government crackdown on journalists and arrived here to become Ithaca City of Asylum's 7th resident artist. After his 2-year residency, Pedro and his family settled in Ithaca to live and work, and he currently serves on the ICOA board, an amazing contribution that we welcome and just are thrilled to have. We are, yes indeed. But so now we can give him applause. We are absolutely thrilled that he's here and so generously agreed to share his work with us tonight. And so now I'm just going to turn it over to you because you're not here to see me.
Thank you very much to all of you for making the effort of being here today. So let's start with the presentation. So thank you all for coming. I would like to thank Ithaca City of Asylum for inviting me to talk about my work and this specific project, and the Tompkins Library for hosting us in this wonderful venue tonight. For those who don't know me, or for those who do know me but are wondering what I've been doing lately, I'll start with some details and updates of my career and current work. Well, again, my name is Pedro Molina. I'm a cartoonist, journalist, illustrator, activist. I have been drawing most of my life. What I started doing for pleasure, to entertain myself, later became my preferred tool for expressing myself and then my way of earning a living. At this point, drawing has simply become a basic function of my existence, as vital as breathing. As you may notice from my accent, my story did not begin in this country. I was born in Nicaragua, Central America. It is a country that few people here may know, and if they do, it will probably be because of its turbulent political history, which has been plagued by dictatorships, revolutions, tyrants, martyrs, heroes, and villains of all kinds and eras. I mention this because it is precisely this story that shaped my professional path and ultimately brought me here before you tonight. I experienced my first exile at the age of 10 when the war of the 80s between the Sandinista regime supported by the then Soviet Union and the Contras supported by the Reagan administration turned my country into a burning, bloody hell during what was ironically known as the Cold War. Like millions of others, my family had to leave to save our lives, even though it meant losing everything else. During those years, I remember my parents talking a lot about politics and the harsh reality of life in Nicaragua and in exile. Despite being a child, I found all this intriguing and would often ask why we had to live like this and who was to blame for so much death, destruction, and family separation. Years later, when the war ended, thanks to elections and the return of democracy, I also returned to Nicaragua. I finished school, and when it was time to decide what to do with the rest of my life, instead of choosing a career in fine arts, my passion for drawing merged with my personal experience and my need for understanding and questioning our history and reality, which led me to the world of editorial cartoons and journalism. So I ended up turning my hobby and my personal traumas into a career, one that I pursued and developed for many years from my home in Estelí, in the north of Nicaragua, until 2018, when my home country was once again plunged into another murderous and destructive dictatorship, forcing me, along with a lot of fellow journalists and at the media outlet that I used to work there, into exile once again. That's how I ended up coming here, invited by Ithaca City of Asylum, and with the help of another educational, institutions here in Ithaca and local organizations, I was able to keep doing the work that I do. From the first day I arrived here until today, I have not stopped drawing cartoons about what is happening in Nicaragua and other parts of Latin America, as well as drawing about what is happening in this other homeland that has welcomed me, but which caused me anguish when I see that many harmful political behaviors that we have already suffered in our Latin American countries are beginning to be seen here as well. But now let's move on to the project that brings us together today. Some time ago, the United Nations Development Program approached me with an interesting proposal. They wanted me to explore the idea, they were exploring the idea of commissioning 3 graphic novels on topics related to democracy and Latin American reality. Their goal was to reach audiences outside the halls where reports are presented, especially younger audiences or those who consume content in other formats. The proposal was, of course, very close to what I do in my regular job as an opinion cartoonist, so they didn't have to do much to convince me to be part of the project. The artists included in the project were Germán Andino, originally from Honduras, he's now living in Spain, Rosario Lucas from Mexico, and myself. We were given several story proposals and we were free to approach them from our own perspectives. The proposals were based on the realities of our countries, such as corruption, migration, and gang violence. Each artist could choose a couple of themes on which to base their story. I choose migration because it's a current issue, but it turns out that another artist had already chosen migration before me. So I decided to focus on events in the history of Latin American democracy, because we either know very little about them or have taken them for granted for too long without understanding their significance. I was presented with a series of interesting historical moments and a basic outline of where the story could go, but I was given complete freedom to structure and flesh it out as I saw fit. Of course, I had to respect certain content rules, like not using curse words, which is very hard to do when you're dealing with Latin American politics. But yeah. So I started writing the script. I needed a setting that will bring together a diverse group of people in terms of age, gender, and race, and of course, an excuse to get them talking about history. The original proposal was for a group of people to meet in a library to talk about history. But as much as I like and respect libraries, such as this one, that is hosting us tonight, I felt that a more personal, a more human connection between the group was needed. So I decided to change the setting and backstory. In my script, the diverse group of characters come together not to study in a library, but to help a mutual friend take care of the books and other belongings of a friend of theirs, a university professor who has just passed away. And it is in this chaotic office that the story begins. One by one, over coffee, the characters browse through books and boxes, and from there the stories emerge, the milestones of Latin American democracy that I want to address. Then, in a second moment, each one connects part of that story with their own personal reality, reflecting and drawing lessons from it. Now, regarding the specific milestones of democracy that I included, they were chosen from their relevance and for the message that they can convey in the present. To present them, I made an artistic decision very early on. For each case, I will try to use a different artistic aesthetic that will visually echo the historical moment I was talking about. For example, to discuss the functioning of Mayan society, I researched the rich visual culture of these indigenous societies, which is spread from Mexico to the rest of Central America. These are the images that were my reference for that specific part of the book. And then I went to draw that part of the book in that specific style, it was very fun. I repeated the process of visually adapting to the era I was talking about as much as my own script allowed. For instance, for the part about the colonial era, I decided to draw in the style of drawings that you will find in the personal diaries and documents from historians who lived in that particular time. You will see my drawings based on this style later in the presentation. At other moment, I went to reproduce the style of famous Mexican engravings to talk about the era of the revolution in Mexico, of course. I also used all pictures from that time as reference. And I gotta say, from the artistic point of view, it was a very interesting experiment. But most importantly, it was very, very fun to draw, right? Trying to mimic all these different tools with the digital tools that now we have at hand. We can talk about that later if you want to. But yeah, it was really fun. And here is the finished page, just as it shows up on the book. Here's another example. I focus on the style of all newspapers from the 60s and the 70s to illustrate the political realities of that era in Latin America. A personal assessment. I believe newspapers have historical and aesthetic value. They have historical value, of course, because of the information they contain. But they also have aesthetic value because of the artisanal way they were manufactured, as well as the design, images, and typography choices that, even without noticing it, recorded the cultural and artistic sensibilities of each era. And they have aesthetic value because, all of this together. So here is that finished page for you to see too, just as it shows in the book. Now, I would like to share with you some excerpts, some pages, and stories from the book. A quick note. This is not the official English translation in the way that may appear in the official translated version of the book. Because, by the way, they are translating this book into English, French, and Portuguese because the idea is to send it, to all countries in Latin America. And yeah, some of you may be surprised that we don't all speak only Spanish, but anyway. So for this is my translation, and which I just did to share with you these stories today. The professional one should be, of course, much better. So here it goes. The struggles for independence in Latin America were marked by the violence of battles, but also because of many other customs and sometimes vices, legacies of colonialism. And here I'm going to translate what each one of the characters is saying. The one on the left is saying, I'm sick of others telling us what we should or shouldn't do on our own land. They take everything we have in exchange for whatever they feel like giving us, and they impose their will on us without asking. We must become independent. And the other guy says, I completely agree. If we live and produce well here, it's only fair that we should be the ones to decide what gets done and what doesn't. That's right. Freedom for all, equal rights and obligations. Let every citizen's voice to be heard. And then the other guy replies, hold on a minute, my friend. That voice for everyone sounds nice, but it can make a lot of noise. You are not going to compare the opinion of those of us who have an education and a name with that of the ignorant and rebellious rabble, are you? But didn't we say we wanted to live without bosses? And then the other guy says, well, I have a better idea. To live like the new bosses, right? Which it was happening in Latin America, pretty much in all of it. Here's another part of the book. It is a hot night in August of 1791. A group of slaves from the French colony of Saint-Domingue at the time gathered for a ceremony that would later go down in history. Brothers, it has been more than 10 years since the French freed themselves from the royal oppressors, but we remain their slaves. They exploit us, humiliate us, and force us to hide our customs and beliefs. That is why today, protected by the darkness of the night that blends with our skin, we gather here not only to honor our beliefs, but to share our desire, or rather our right, to freedom. We invite you to make a pact between us for the liberation of our people and our land. We call upon our ancestors and our guardian spirits to give us the strength we need to end oppression. May the spirit that possesses us today be that of freedom. That bonfire lit in Boa Caiman will be the spark that initiated the only successful slave revolution in history, culminating in the founding in 1804 of the nation that we know today as Haiti. And this is story from Ecuador, South America. At the end of the 19th century in Ecuador, a woman was born who would bring about great change in the 20th century, Matilde Hidalgo. A curious and intelligent girl, her thirst for knowledge could not be satisfied by elementary school alone, the norm for women at that time. So she convinced her parents to enroll her in secondary school. Matilde was the first woman to graduate with honors from high school in Ecuador in 1913. But she didn't stop there. After being rejected by one university, she got into another one to study medicine. She then went on to earn her doctorate, becoming the first woman to do so. She then decided to continue her studies and specialize in pediatrics, neurology, and dietetics. She also added to her achievements the vice presidency of the Ecuadorian Cultural Center and the lifetime presidency of the Red Cross organization in her country, plus the Medal of Merit for Public Health. All of that. In 1924, legislative elections, in the 1924 legislative elections in Ecuador, Matilde went to vote, but officials prevented her from doing so because she was a woman. Matilde decided to challenge the system, arguing that the Constitution did not mention gender when defining who could vote and who could not, and that therefore she should be allowed to vote. Despite opposition from more traditional sectors, Matilde finally succeeded in securing women's right to vote and to be elected. In fact, a few years later, Matilde Hidalgo was one of the first two women to be elected to public office. Later in the book, I also get to mention the lessons that countries considered less relevant due to their size and location, such as those in Central America, have taught the rest of the world. For example, my native country, Nicaragua. Like I said earlier today, when my home country has appeared in the news or been mentioned in history, it is usually because of its armed revolutions or dictatorships. But in 1990, it was the first country in the Americas to elect a woman president in free elections, which led to the national reconciliation after a decade of brutal war between Nicaraguans. Today, it is considered one of the best presidencies in Nicaragua history, one that led to what we could now call the most important democratic window of the last century in our nation. Her name was Violeta Chamorro, who just passed away in exile, where so many Nicaraguans have been forced to flee. In Costa Rica, and she died on June 14 this year. As an artist native to this region, but also as a victim of its historical missteps, this project has helped me to reevaluate the steps that we as societies have been taking throughout our history. Steps that have not always been quick or painless in a journey that has not been without stumbles, but which nevertheless continues. Learning from our history allows us to remember that even though at certain times, such as now, we may think that all is lost, that nothing has ever been so bad before, and that there is no way out, many people in the past also felt the same desolation at the time, in situations that were even worse, with less access to mechanisms of resistance or resilience than we have. But nevertheless, they were able to achieve change and conquer rights. Changes and rights that now other generations must value, defend, or recover, depending on their specific position in the reality that surrounds them. And it is the responsibility of all of us who had breathed or want to continue breathing the air of freedom and dignity, regardless of our age, gender, race, ideology, or religion, to continue breaking with courage values information and empathy, the chains that ignorance, trauma, cruelty, authoritarianism, and fanaticism seek to impose in our societies. So that's it for my presentation. And I'm over here if you want to ask some questions or whatever you want to say. Thank you.
Hello, Pedro.
Hey.
Hi. When will your book be out, and when will the English edition be available?
When the book will be out and how to get it? Is that the question?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is like a very special project for these people, and they have their own marketing and promotion, plan. So far as I know, the Spanish edition, which will be like the first one, is going to be presented this December 13. I don't know where or how, but then it should be available in all these countries and also in digital form to download from their website. So I would say that if you would like to check it out, you can wait for the English translation of it, or if you want to get the Spanish one or whatever, which one you would like to check, of the 3 graphic novels, not just mine. The best way to be informed about when and where is that happening is by following my social media, which you can do. It's PX Molina, and X and Blue Sky and Facebook and Instagram. And I will be sharing that information as soon as I get it. I already saw the proofs, the printed proofs of it. It's really, really nice. They are doing like a little package with the 3 graphic novels together, and it's going to be really nice to have the actual printed books. But you can also download for free these graphic novels when they finally upload it to their website. Yeah.
I have the mic, so I'll do the next guy. Pedro, as someone who lived in a dictatorship and who's now looked back at the experiences of many countries in your area, do you have any advice for us?
I have a lot of advice to you guys, but I think I have already talked to many of you, one-to-one about all these. But in the end, I think it's very simple. I think one of the problems that we have as humans is that either we ignore or we take for granted the rights that we already have. And we see ourselves always too powerless to actually achieve new ones. None of that things is something that we should be doing. I mean, if you have the rights, the best way to defend rights, and this is something that I'm always saying, is to exercise those rights. That's the best way to defend them. You don't have to do something like huge or, or too flashy or whatever. Just the fact of being there every day, exercising your right to free speech, saying, hey, I think this is not right, in whatever place you can do it, with respect, but with conviction. I think it is very important. And I will advise, countries like these, people like US citizens, to not take your rights for granted. Because sometimes people tend to think that because their rights have been there so long, they will always be there. But coming from a country like Nicaragua, I have to say that you will be surprised how quick you can lose everything. Like in Nicaragua, we lost our right to freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and freedom of movement, like in months, if not in weeks, right? So that's something to always keep in our minds, and I think that's the price of liberty, being always aware of everything that is happening around us, and trying to believe in our rights. Because if we don't do it ourselves, the people who are in power, they will not respect us either. Yeah.
Amen to that. I wanted to ask you about the other two collaborators on the book. Have they had similar experiences to yours? Have you worked with them before? Do you know them?
All right. So Germán Andino is from Honduras. I don't know him in person. I do know his work. I know that he left Honduras. He is now living in Spain. But if you can take a look at his work, he's always talking about the violence problems, for example, in Honduras, talking about the gangs, and the problem with the gangs all over Central America, and the drug trafficking, and all those things that are a huge concern for Central America and Mexico. So I'm guessing that's somehow connected to the reason that he lives in Spain. Rosario Lucas, she's an illustrator. I haven't seen a lot of her work. As a graphic novelist, I know she does a lot of illustration, but she's still living in Mexico, right? That doesn't mean that it's not dangerous to do this kind of work in Mexico. I'm talking about, like being critic of the system, or about, all these groups of power that in Mexico it can include the narco, the guerrillas. So it's really, really dangerous. But I don't know if she also does like journalistic work, honestly. Yeah.
Mark, I have two questions. What medium do you use? And the other one is the people that were in the know about what was going on in Nicaragua, such as yourself, did they go to people who were not in the know and make relationships with them to bring them the information of what was happening in Nicaragua? We fall very short. Progressives in this country, as I can attest to, will not leave their cubicles to cross ethnic, class, and cultural boundaries and go to save the world, low income, or communities of color.
Right.
So,
Okay, I'm sorry. The first part of your question was.
I wanted to know what medium.
Okay. So that's the technical part, and then the other. All right. So I work digitally. I use a Wacom Cintiq, which is pretty much like a huge iPad, in which you can draw on, and I use a stylus to draw. Most of the time, I create my own brushes because I wanted to mimic the ones that I used to use when I was working in the traditional way. I went to work this way just because it was practical. I used to do it all in the traditional way, with real paper, real pencils, and real brushes, and all the real hassles of having to deal with all that. Like you were working like for 3 hours with your watercolor and then spill the black ink on top of everything, and then you had to start all over again. So it wasn't practical when you were working in journalism, because you have a daily deadline that you have to meet no matter what. And then when I started doing stuff also for publications outside Nicaragua, I also had to translate my stuff. And it was a huge pain to do that, right? So, but with digitally, I created my own font, with my own handwriting. So I can do that very easily and very fast. And that's the only reason I went this way. I do draw the line about which digital tools you can use and why, right? And I have to mention that because right now we are all dealing with this AI stuff. So I have a lot to say about that topic, but that will take us out of that. Yeah, about the other thing. Yeah, one thing that I also say when I have the chance to speak in public events, even when it's not natural for me. I I became a cartoonist because I don't like talking to people. I don't feel comfortable. I am not good at it. I know, right? So, because everything that happened in Nicaragua, the few people that actually was able to get out and maybe get the chance to be in front of the audience, you just have to do it. Because I know a lot of Nicaraguans who can't say a single word about what is happening over there, even if they are outside Nicaragua because they are afraid of their families inside Nicaragua, what could happen to them. So if I can do it, I feel it's part of my duty, not as an artist, not as an artist, not as an, but as a human being, and as a Nicaraguan, to speak about what is happening over there. And I know that there are other people like me, human rights defenders, Catholic priests, because the dictatorship has forced out a lot of Catholic priests from Nicaragua. And they go out there and they try to reach out to more people and try to talk about things like this. Sometimes it's easier, sometimes it takes more time, and you have to be very patient. And you get to meet with a lot of different people who will get it right away, and people who come to you in Evans and ask you, hey, wait a minute. Are you telling me that those guys, they used to be the good guys in the 80s are now the bad guys? I don't believe, and then you have to go into talk to them and say, yeah, that's actually what I'm saying, and then trying to educate them on what is the difference about what was happening in the 80s and what is happening right now, and how come a lot of famous figures of that revolution, they are also in exile because of what is happening in Nicaragua right now, especially artists or intellectuals, right? Like, I don't know, just to mention a few, if you are connected somehow to Nicaragua back from the 80s, Carlos Mejia Godoy, which it was this great singer, composer of Nicaraguan music. Luis Enrique Mejia, both of them friends of mine. They were like the John Lennon and Paul McCartney of Nicaraguan Revolution. And they were very, very well known in Europe. And it was thanks to them that people in Europe started to know about Sandinista revolution, right? So they are both in exile. And a lot of their kids are also exiled because they are enemies of Daniel Ortega and Rosario Murillo. They are considered enemies of this revolution, right? Sergio Ramirez was the vice president of Daniel Ortega back in the 80s, the writer. And now he's exiled in Spain, right? So you have to explain all this to these people in order for them to understand how things have changed at this point. So yeah, it's a struggle sometimes, but you got to do it.
You were showing the source material, which I believe you said was from the UN, sort of histories, stories of Latin America. I was reminded of the Eduardo Galeano historical series, and I would imagine that the UN had a very different perspective. Did you feel at all limited by what they were sort of giving you as the source of stories? Or?
Oh, back when I was younger and I was inside Nicaragua, Eduardo Galeano is a great writer. And I think I learned a lot of him, I think I learned a lot of stuff from Silvio Rodriguez's songs, famous Cuban singer from the revolution and everything. But I do think it was limited. Like, just to give you a very simple example, one of my favorite writers is George Orwell. And I never knew while I lived inside Nicaragua that there was a thing called the Animal Farm. Ever. It was until I went out in my first exile that I realized that I find out about that book. Why? For obvious reasons, right? It wasn't like, published in Nicaragua. You couldn't, maybe some people knew about it, but it wasn't something that the kids could have access to. So I think it was very limited, and that's why I think it's very important to be able to read any kind of books, any kind, right? even the ones that people are always trying to ban, maybe those one first actually, and try to find out why they want to ban them. But it is important, and I think it's the only way. Even at this age and time in my life, I'm always trying to reach out and listen what anyone else that may not think like me or have a different upbringing can tell me about their perspective about something. Like, for example, I have been in Evans, and we talk about religion and the Catholic Church and everything. And if you see it this way, the Catholic Church in Latin America had a very different role than the Catholic Church in Spain back in times of Franco, right? So I totally get when a cartoonist from Spain is doing these brutal cartoons against the Catholic Church, because that's their experience. That's what they knew about it, right? But on the other hand, back in the 70s and 80s, a lot of Catholic priests were dying trying to defend people in Central America. For example, Monsignor Romero, which you may know from El Salvador. So that's what I'm saying. It's always interesting to try to learn from all kinds of sources. Thank you. Yeah.
Hello. I was just wondering, in terms of the unrelenting deadlines you have to face, and with these larger projects as well, like can you describe how you go about juggling all this, and how you also kind of keep your creative juices flowing day after day? Like, it can't just be happening by itself.
Right. Well, my workload, just to put this in perspective, I draw, every week I have to draw 7 cartoons for Nicaraguan outlet, Confidencial.digital. Stuff about Nicaraguan politics and Latin American politics in Spanish. So I do 7 cartoons this week for them. The Sunday one is actually a comic page, right? On top of that, I do 4 cartoons about US politics here in the US for the syndicate and for the website to publish my work. And on top of that, I'm doing this stuff and some other things, right? So I am basically working all the time. I just wish it could be paid, according to what I'm doing. But at least I am doing something that it makes me feel useful, that it makes me think that the purpose for which I exist, I can still do it. So it is very difficult, but yeah, I kind of manage. And then again, the digital tools make it more achievable for me. But it is a challenge. It is a constant challenge. It is, I finished this presentation like 15 minutes before coming here. And, I had to go to that thing in Miami. And believe me, I got there to Miami Beach. And I only saw the beach by the few hours that the event was happening. The rest of the time, I was in my hotel room doing tomorrow's cartoon, or doing something else with this thing. So I'm basically working all the time. I'm sorry, there is no, but I do think that it's very important. The very few free time that I have, either I am with my family or I am trying to, put something else on my visual library in my brain. So watching movies is a great recharger for me, especially directors that are visually interesting for me, like, I don't know, Stanley Kubrick or Guillermo del Toro or, Tarantino, all the framing, all the lights and everything. That kind of stuff, it does fuel me. And I do follow the work of a lot of colleagues, that also inspire me. And I read stuff, and if I am always, what takes more time of my daily routine is actually writing the ideas. But once I have all my ideas in writing, the drawing part is the fun part. And in order to do that, I will put a podcast or an audiobook or music or whatever it is. So I'm always trying to put something on my brain that gets me going, that gets me excited about something. Yeah.
Pedro, can you just talk, well, for one thing, I should just say that I find you so inspiring as a person. And
You shouldn't. My work habits are not healthy.
glad that it's you doing it. Just if you could say a few words about security, your safety, the risks you take, the courage that it requires to do the work you do.
Well, I don't think, honestly, the work that I do, the work a lot of people is doing that are in similar situations, I don't see it as nothing special. The ones who have created this special, situation in which we have to work are the ones who are threatening us all the time, right? We are not doing anything special. We are just trying to do what everyone wants to do, which is express themselves and have an opinion about the issues that affect us all, right? The problem is that when the system is not letting you do that, and you keep insisting that you have the right to do that, then you get into trouble, and then there is some noise around it, and suddenly you are doing something that some people consider like heroic. But we are not doing that. We are just trying to do our thing. I mean, that's the way I see it. And when I go to these different events and I get to talk to another artist from other parts of the world, you have no idea, how much these people have sacrificed for their craft. I got to see a very shy writer from Africa. I will keep the name out of it, but and he was a very shy man, and he wouldn't talk. He would talk even less than me, when we were in the meeting and everything, and it was, his writing was very powerful, and I was wondering why if his thing is writing, why does he have these problems communicating so much and everything? Then I found out more about his history. He was tortured brutally by the regime of his country, and he in one of the interviews that I saw of him, you could see the pictures of his back, all destroyed like the ones that you see from slavery times, that kind of stuff, right? And he was being silent. He never talked about that in the event or anything else, because that is not important for him. His writing is important for him, right? And I think, and I completely understand that. I can connect with that. And for me, he is brave, right? But I think that the way that he sees, I just want to do this thing, right? And everything that has happened to me, it has been because other people don't want me to do this. And that's it, right? But I have to keep going. Not even his own daughters and sons knew about this situation. He will use long shirts in his house to prevent for his kids to find out about this part of his life. So I think that's really courageous. But I do think that you have to also speak about this kind of stuff for the rest of the people to understand that whatever you do, if you're an artist, it can be very difficult for some people. And try to, if you can, do whatever you do with freedom, you should be happy to do it. And to learn to help other people too, in order for them to also do it. Yeah.
Do you notice a difference in sense of humor between your country and this country?
Yeah. I mean, if there is a difference between the sense of, yeah, of course. And I think it's a difference in the sense of humor of everybody, honestly. The stuff that I can find humorous it may well not be the stuff that you find humorous or any other person in this, room could find humorous. But I do think that you can find those very basic point of communication and tricks in humor in order to try to reach out most of your audience. But you gotta be sure that every time that you do a cartoon, at least somebody will not get it, at least somebody will get offended by it, and at least and somebody else is gonna agree with you and think that you are great and all that, right? But it's impossible to kind of work to do this kind of job, creating that you can, believing that you can please everybody. That's absolutely impossible, especially in these times where everybody can get offended by anything. I was joking, the other day talking about colleagues. I'm pretty sure there is somebody out there in the internet complaining about the bad press that cats get because of Garfield. I'm pretty sure there is somebody out there complaining about Garfield comics because they are cat lovers, and it's not fair how cats are portrayed in that comic, right? So, yeah, you just have to, humor is important in what I do, but as long as it's a good tool to communicate an idea, but it's not the final end of what I do. I am not I got cartoonist, right? Like the ones in New Yorker. I'm not just trying to make you laugh. I'm trying to make you think about something. Yeah.
Well, that, I think, brings us to a close. Pedro, I think John had the right word, inspiring. It was an inspiring and engaging and amazing talk, and we appreciate you taking the time. We appreciate all of you coming out tonight. Stay warm if you can, but mostly we want to thank you very much for your generosity.
Thank you.